Hello and welcome to Press Corner here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Now, as you know, Press Corner is our regular Sunday morning review of key events with our colleagues in the media here in the heart of Europe. On Press Corner, we celebrate the privilege of a free press by listening to diverse opinions and letting our audience reach their own conclusions. Today, our guests are Piotr Drabic from the Fakt newspaper. We've got Joe Harper, who's a freelance journalist living in Warsaw, and Wojciech Łobodziński, foreign affairs editor at the Polish press agency. Welcome all, and thank you for getting out of bed on a Sunday morning.
Thank you.
To join us to make the effort. So, yeah, I mean, lots of kind of exciting stuff going on. And perhaps we could start with France. The second round of the French election is happening today. The first round produced some actually rather startling results, I think. We saw riots and protests in the streets of France because the National Rally, the far right or centre-right, depends who you're speaking to, party of Marine Le Pen won 33% of the vote. So let's get into that. But before that, we have a short video which I'd like to share and get your view on.
Marine Le Pen's Eurosceptic anti-immigration national rally topped the parliamentary election's first round with a third of the vote, opening the prospect of the far right leading a French government for the first time since World War II. The prospect of that sparked street demonstrations and horse trading between politicians. Under the French two-round voting system, in constituencies where no candidates won outright in the first round, the top two candidates, as well as any candidate with more than 12.5% of the vote, moved to a second round. Campaigning has intensified over the past week. Of the 500 seats being contested, a total of 217 candidates from President Emmanuel Macron's Ensemble and the left-wing New Popular Front have withdrawn. 409 constituencies are now being fought in one-to-one battles. The aim is to avoid splitting votes in three-way seats, to block the far right from winning a majority. Macron called the snap election after support for National Rally surged in the European Parliament elections. Several surveys now project a drop in the number of seats National Rally could win, making an absolute majority even harder to reach. National Rally leader Jordan Bardella says the tactical response of the mainstream parties shows disdain for voters. He urged them to prove pollsters wrong in the runoff vote, in which his party would need 289 seats for a majority. Pollsters say much uncertainty remains, including whether voters will go along with these efforts to block the National Rally. Authorities have prepared for further protests. 30,000 extra police are being deployed across the country to tackle any unrest.
Right, so Piotr, I'll start with you. Now, clearly, President Macron misunderstood or miscalculated when he called the snap election about a month ago. And it was triggered by the fact that National Rally won so many seats in the European Parliament. What do you think President Macron wanted to see by calling this?
That was a va-banque move from the President Macron, because he trying to beat the National Rally using this tool as a snap election, because as I understand, he trying to show that the National Rally have no idea how to manage the country, you know, how to solve the most important problem. Of course, we know that the National Rally have very anti-establishment program, you know, trying to rebuild the European Union. And we see after this first round results that that wasn't true, you know, that the President Macron have much more bigger problem than announcement the snap election, and we see that this is the really big problem for this political community. If we talk about the people who standing behind the President Macron, and we need to understand that after a similar situation in the French political history, President resigned. And President Macron say, I will not resign.
Right.
We will see what will going to happen.
Right, exactly. President Macron doesn't want to resign. Reminds me of another president, actually, in another country, but that's another matter. But that said, I mean, surely he'll be put in a position, Wojciech, where he'll have no choice. I mean, he's not even contributing to the election process in any way. His last tweet was about the French football team. He knows he's toxic. He knows that he's not popular. Surely he doesn't have long in the job. What do you think?
No, I cannot imagine Macron resigning, actually. You know, there were two plans on the table while he was calling snap election. The first plan was to gather support around his centrist party ensemble and maybe get more votes, and then in the second turn make left-wing parties, just like socialists, one of the parts of the new Front Populaire, make them a smaller ally, whatever. But the second plan, much more difficult, was to make a Machiavellian move, just like Chirac did with Lionel Jospin. Make your biggest threat your prime minister and then see them burning out.
Right.
And right now, French people are voting currently in France.
Right.
And most of the people cannot see this great majority of nationalists in order to make government. They said Bardella declared that without majority, 289 MPs, he's not going to make this government. So we are in a quandary actually right now, and so is Macron, because it's impossible for him to make a coalition with Jean-Luc Mélenchon and La France Insoumise, the biggest partner in this whole left-wing coalition.
Right.
There might be some allies among socialists. You know, it's his former party that he backstabbed and created the centrist party of his. So what we are going to see might be a minority government ruled by decrees. You know, French Constitution 49.3 makes it possible for president to just rule over the country using decrees. We might see split on the left also, but there is also the third chance that we are going to see a coalition government of nationalists and Republicans, the ones that were not going into coalition before elections, but there might be some change of weather.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll get into that in a bit more detail. Joe, I'd like to ask you, what was it about Marine Le Pen's party that obviously struck an enormous chord with the French populace?
I think historically France is, like a lot of other countries in Europe, has a quite deep division over its kind of colonial past. I think the French, the people that tend to support Le Pen are those that probably would have been, pro-Algerian or pro-France's presence in Algeria, for example. I think there's quite a large community of those still existing, and then you have on top of that, you have a kind of base support around that group, I think. But then on top of that, I think you have questions about immigration.
Right.
And immigration as a topic in European political discourse has moved from kind of peripheral to central in more or less every country. And it's the far right, unfortunately, in my opinion, that somehow galvanized, it's occupied the ground in which that becomes mainstream and apparently
leveraged demand of.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that you see it all over Europe. I mean, apart from actually in the UK as well, to some extent, Farage's party,
right,
and so on. But I think it's part of those two forces anyway. Yeah, you've got a kind of residual, let's say 15-20%. Le Pen's father would get, I can't remember, I mean, in one case I think he got 25-30%.
Yeah, 25 in presidential elections.
Yeah, and it was quite close, wasn't it?
Second turn,
yeah.
So, those people exist. I'm not quite sure the generational legacy, but I suspect it's older people
Yes.
who have a memory of the greatness of France. A
Yes,
little
it'll
bit
be
like
interesting to see what the demographics are like of this 33% that took over. But I mean, Marine Le Pen's been trying to distance herself from her father's policies, presenting herself as perhaps more moderate. And when it comes to things like the European Union, when it comes to France's commitment to Ukraine and so on, her Prime Minister has said, well, we'll live up to our obligations. Do you think this is a cosmetic statement, or do you think they really mean it? Have they really changed that much?
I think that Marine Le Pen trying to push the agenda which is possible to manage, during the possible new government, because I guess that the most of the majority of the voters which support the National Rally trying to show the red card to the President Macron and the parliamentary majority, which basically not solve the most important problems in the French society. Starting from the taxes part, from the migration policy, and something which is very interesting for me that the President Macron announcement, when announced the snap election, killed his child. I think about the Olympic Games in July and August. And now everybody will discuss about the political chaos, not discussing about how France can show the best perspective, how we developed
some kind of unity, perhaps.
Exactly. Yes. Because even the win of the French football team in the Euro 2024 will not covering, what will gonna happen after today evening.
Yeah, it is surprising. I mean, the timing is absolutely...
Yes, and also I want to mention about Gabriel Attal, from January, the new Prime Minister of France, and we know that the President Macron trying to give him, role of the new president, of the new leader of this central coalition, and now we see that the Gabriel Attal will be one of the most important victims of this snap election.
Yes, absolutely. There's so many moving pieces, and many of them are still up in the air. Actually, I don't know what's going to happen with him. Wojciech, you started to talk about the coalitions that may form. Mm-hmm. There are followers of Macron's centrist parties who refuse to get into bed with many of the left-wing parties. They prefer Le Pen to Mélenchon, for example.
Or they prefer socialists, than La France Insoumise. The problem is that the biggest part of the Nouvelle Front Populaire is coming from La France Insoumise, so it's going to be translated France Unbound, maybe.
Yeah.
And these people are just a left-wing party, just like Jeremy Corbyn used to be. We are going to talk about Labour and Labour victory in the last election. This is the same dish, the same menu, the same family of thought. On the other side, we've got socialists who, used to be third way. They can switch to third way anytime. They can become more Mitterrand, more Blairites, whatever. They are the party of power. Where is the power? Then they are going there. So there is a possibility that the minority government might be with them, or on the right with Republicans, and then maybe with some of the less regional parties. So we cannot forget that around 20 to 30 members of the parliament are not going to be from any major party. There are some kind of regional activists and whatsoever.
Yeah, now, I mean, the picture that Wojciech's just painted, right, very, very fragmented. So even if coalitions are formed, I mean, getting them to make a decision sounds like a nightmare.
The French face series of quite important decisions as well in the next 12 months. We also have the election in the United States, right? I mean, my sense is that this is a way of kind of repositioning, settling the position of France before the election in the US.
Right.
I don't know whether it worked. I mean, I guess as calling a snap election is always a risky thing, but it muddies the water, right? Yeah, I can't see Macron surviving with any extended political leverage from this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be unclear that the winners are not going to be the centrist parties, I imagine, you know, it's the far right, which is going to come out of this probably on a, you know, on a roll, as it were.
Right. Well, we don't have long to wait now. We should know the early results fairly soon. But speaking of snap elections, let's move on to our next topic, which is the election called by Rishi Sunak, perhaps ill-advisedly. And what has happened, again, I think, was not what he was hoping for. Let's have a look at a quick video.
Keir Starmer greets friends and supporters as he arrives in Downing Street, the official home of Britain's Prime Minister. In his first speech as PM, Starmer acknowledged the scale of the challenge he faces.
Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. The world is now a more volatile place. This will take a while. But have no doubt that the work of change begins immediately. Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community, our NHS back on its feet facing the future, secure borders, safer streets, everyone treated with dignity and respect at work, the opportunity of clean British power cutting your energy bills for good. And brick by brick, we will rebuild the infrastructure of opportunity.
Labour won a massive majority in the 650-seat Parliament, prompting Rishi Sunak's resignation on Friday morning before Starmer went to meet King Charles and be formally named Prime Minister. Centre-left Labour won more than 410 seats, an increase of 211, while the centre-right Conservatives lost 250 members of Parliament. Among the high-profile scalps were former Prime Minister Liz Truss and a record number of senior ministers. One of the night's winners was Nigel Farage, the leader of the right-wing populist Reform UK party. Farage led the UK's Brexit campaign in 2016. His party has 5 seats, one more than the Green Party. Starmer's new cabinet started work straight away, meeting for the first time on Saturday. The election came after a period of turmoil that saw 5 prime ministers in 8 years. Surveys showed many voters simply wanted change after 14 years of Conservative rule. If those polls are correct, Starmer has become Prime Minister with one of the biggest to-do lists in British history, but without a groundswell of true support or the financial resources to tackle it.
He's saying all the right things, isn't he, Piotr? He's saying, you know, absolutely what people want to hear, but then that's, many would argue, what the politician's job is. What do you reckon to that result?
So the most important thing that, of course, the Labours win, but at the same time, Liberal Democrats got much more MPs than in the last term.
71,
and,
I believe.
Yes, Liz Truss out of the parliament is also a very important sign that's showing how conservative Tories, you know, create this disaster atmosphere for them. You know, this is the worst result in the decades if we talk about the Conservatives.
Right.
And also we have the Nigel Farage first time in the British Parliament, which is basically surprised because he existing, you know, in the European public opinion as one of the most important conservative or far-right politicians, but he will sit there in the first time.
Absolutely.
And I hope that the new Prime Minister Starmer will trying to find a new way to negotiate with the European Union. I know about some kind of plans about the veterinary stuff and so on, but of course we're looking to this from perspective in the Central Eastern Europe. We need Great Britain to discuss with supporting Ukraine, policy against Russia, and trying to be more connected, not more divided after the Brexit.
Right. Okay. So some kind of consistency, Wojciech, you know, would be good. Is what I think Piotr is saying in terms of the EU's stance. But Starmer has made that clear. You know, he's stated quite clearly, you know, we're going to support Ukraine, etc. But one of the criticisms, of course, that Starmer's government has is the lack of experience. There are a few members of his cabinet who do have some experience, but overall, Do you think they're up to the job?
You know, this is the most popular argument against any Labour government in history, made by Tory politicians. You know, they're always unprepared because more than 2/3 of the governments in the history of Great Britain used to be Tories. So, you know, they are always unprepared, especially after 14 years. But right now, for me, I've got a much more grimmer perspective of this new Labour government. They've lost 700,000 voters compared to 2019. They've lost more than 2.5 million of voters compared to 2017. This was under Jeremy Corbyn. At the same time, the left was purged. Jeremy Corbyn ran as an independent. So Diane Abbott and the rest of them. I mean, maybe around 50 left-wing MPs, you know, from the left-wing caucus were purged from the electoral list. At the same time, Labour's manifesto is much more right-wing than even Tony Blair's one. You know, it's hard for me to imagine Tony Blair or Gordon Brown using the same manifesto to win in their elections, you know. And right now, they used to be scapegoats for any left-wing candidate from the Labour Party, so Jeremy Corbyn and the rest of them. So this might be a hollowed victory. You know, if reform was more focused on selected places, you know, to win more MPs and so on, it wouldn't be so fragmented. They would be on a much better place than they are right now. You know,
reform, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, combined right-wing and far-right voters. I don't know, 5% more of them, 7% more of them. So
reform
if
got 16%, is that right? 16%. Tories got 24.
24, yeah.
Right.
So it would be 40%.
40%.
Right.
Labour got what, 30?
33.
Yeah. Well, there was some
Was it
talk.
only 33 in the end?
43.8.
Okay.
Something like that.
There was some talk, wasn't there, of Conservative voters moving to Farage and some kind of coalition, but clearly that didn't work. Now, staying with Farage, suddenly his case seems to have come out of nowhere, really, and he's made it very clear from the start that it's not about this election; it's about the next one. So he finally has kind of nailed his colours to the mast. I mean, he's saying, right, that's it. I'm going into politics. And he's going full out. But
I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I mean, it's the first time he's been elected.
Yeah.
In Britain, he was an MEP for a long time.
Yes, no, of course.
And he was a big, he was a name within the Parliament. I mean, largely because he was he's got a big mouth.
Yeah, but he's never really admitted to going for power within the UK.
I think he's run.
He's run 7 times.
He's run several times.
Yes.
He ran for UKIP,
Yeah.
I think, in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't think his political message has changed that much.
It hasn't.
You know,
but
it's
this
a
time
combination
he's got a party called Reform, which he has reformed since he joined, which is clearly also carrying the right message, a popular message. Mm-hmm. And from his wording, after the election, he was saying this is all about, the next election.
It's about essentially. I would think it's about his strategy is about taking over the Conservative Party or the position of the Conservative Party. Right.
But isn't that tainted meat? Does he want to be associated with the Conservative
Party? Depends where you stand. I mean, it tainted. If you're looking at a kind of nationalist politics, no, it's not tainted meat. I mean, it's actually in the migration context, which has now become like the central feature of a lot of political discourse in Europe. That nationalist message works. Security over anything else.
Right.
So I think the Conservative Party is probably dead meat. I think that's the problem. It has no. It's a demographically ageing party.
Well, that's what I meant. So why would Farage want to be associated?
Well, he wants to bring in younger people. Apparently, there's a lot of a kind of far right sympathy, in social media, online. I think he wants to regenerate that element.
Understood.
Of the British.
But I mean, Tory parties where the money is in politics right now. So why not taking it without some of the MPs using them as scapegoats of, of the past, and then taking Conservative Party, rebranding it from the point of view of nationalist British tradition and so on. It's possible and plausible.
Yeah, well, we shall see how that evolves. But Piotr, you mentioned the Lib Dems.
Yep.
You said their performance was quite surprising. What do you think is behind that?
I think that, of course, from one hand, we can say that the most of the polls, not before the election, not showing the real support of the party. Also, the Reform UK was estimated to get much more MPs in Parliament than they really got after the elections. Also, the Scottish National Party lost many of the MPs. So I think that this is the result of some kind of trying to find something out of the traditional conservative parts, because we see that this result is like absolutely red card to all the proposition which the Tories giving to the last years.
Yeah.
We see that how ambitious is the Labour program. Yeah, about the building the new houses, about the taxing reform, about the migration stuff. So we see that many of the voters in UK trying to transform and looking for the new politicians, which new. Let's say not new, but they're trying to rebuild this political structure in the UK.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much opportunity they have to do that, considering, really you've got the two big parties and very little else. But for the moment, who knows how that might change. Can we move now to Viktor Orban, our favourite Hungarian Prime Minister, who has recently visited Russia, Moscow and Kiev, on a peace trip, so he says. We have a short video which we can have a look at now.
President Vladimir Putin extends a hand of friendship to Viktor Orban. The Hungarian Prime Minister's trip to Moscow came 5 days into Budapest's 6-month presidency of the Council of the European Union. Putin suggested that Orban had come to Moscow as a representative of the European Council. However, the move has been widely condemned by other EU leaders, who warned that Orban did not act for the bloc. European Council President Charles Michel posted that the EU rotating presidency has no mandate to engage with Russia on behalf of the EU, while Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk questioned the Hungarian PM's motives, asking who was Orban really acting for. Finnish PM Petteri Orpo echoed the concern, saying it was disturbing news that undermined the interests of the European Union. Earlier, on the second day of Hungary's EU presidency, Orban made a surprise visit to Kyiv. The Hungarian leader proposed an immediate ceasefire to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky instead asked Orban to back Kyiv's steps to work for peace in conjunction with international partners. Orban has repeatedly sought to soften EU sanctions in response to Russia's war in Ukraine. His peace mission to Moscow came days before a NATO summit that will address further military aid for Ukraine against what the Western Defence Alliance has called Russia's unprovoked war of aggression.
Wojciech, what do you make of this? What's going on here? I'm confused.
For me, it's a power move against EU and EU officials and so-called bureaucrats. If we look at the nationalist far-right narrative, Viktor Orban is seeing right now that the EU is in peril from the inside, actually, and that he can make this move because, it's possible. Why not?
But what's in it for him?
First, he came to Kiev. Now he's in Moscow. Also it's a product for his political market, Hungarian one. He can portray himself using his own state-owned media, but not only. He's got a lot of friendly oligarchs there who are using the media that he made into their hands and so on. So he can portray himself right now as the only adult in the room, fighting for peace and so on. 3 weeks ago we talked about this so-called peace summit in Switzerland.
Yep.
There wasn't any Russian there, so how you can engage in peace negotiation without your main adversary. And right now, Viktor Orban, is playing here, the only adult in the room, fighting for peace and so on. And actually, the number of voters in Europe is rising. People who are somehow fed up with European elites. Energy prices running high and so on. And also Marine Le Pen's message was that, if Jordan Bardella becomes prime minister, he's not going to send French soldiers into Ukraine soil, but also he's not going to send them long-range missiles and So this was election talk, of course, but there are some people who are going to take advantage of it.
Right. So it sounds like there's some kind of wave, Joe, according to Wojciech. Basically, it's a finger in the eye for the EU. Going along and saying, well, it's starting to. The cracks are appearing in the European Union. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Putin must be really happy about this, mustn't he?
I don't think cracks really are appearing in the European Union. I mean, I think Orban has been a pain for the European Union since he's been in power. I mean, I don't think that if they're appearing, they appeared 14 years ago. Maybe there's. I mean, he's playing the same game, isn't he, Orban? He's playing both ends.
Right. Okay, but is it just for the domestic market?
I've got no idea what goes on in Viktor Orban's head.
I think you and the majority.
I'm not sure. I mean, they have energy contacts. I think the Russians also built a nuclear power station, or they built one. I'm not sure exactly, but there's a lot of Russian investment in Hungary. Right. There's a historical connection. I don't know. I mean, I imagine Orban is playing. It's trying to exert some kind of leverage vis-à-vis the European Union as well, right? I mean, there's all sorts of issues about blocked payments to Hungary still, rule of law, etc., media problems. So, I mean, I guess he will use whichever tools he can, and this presumably is one of them. I mean, meeting Putin is a big stick. Where
it is,
whether it works or not, I doubt it personally, but.
Well, exactly. I mean, Putin will use whoever he can use as a useful person. So,
we observed this visit just after, as I understand, 1 week and 1 week and a half, then the still Belgium presidency in the Council of European Union starting official negotiation with the Ukraine. So that was very important, proof from the Orban that he thinks something completely different. That as I know that the Belgium diplomacy trying to start, in the last minute, this negotiation, because they know that during this next six months it will be impossible to announce that in the Coreper, in the Council of the Ambassadors of the EU members. So what is really important, if we look into this event from my side, is that the Vladimir Putin back to the European mainstream. As I understand, that was the first meeting of the EU official, like EU leader, after the February 2022.
Right.
And Putin can say, okay, so you see that the European Union discussed with me.
All I have to do is wait, and they'll come to me.
Exactly. But at the same time, I think in the next summit in Brussels, many of the European leaders were trying to ask, as I understand at the background, the Viktor Orban. So, what do you hear from the Putin? So maybe that I think that some of the European politicians maybe not happy, but see that maybe this is some kind of link or some kind of possibility to negotiate with Putin, staying with touch with him, and maybe via Orban, some of if, for example, Jordan Bardella will the next Prime Minister of France, they're trying to also, using the Orban to, send some kind of proposition to the.
Well, but some
of course, against Ukraine, because every talk with Putin is against the Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely, and some might say, well, that's simply appeasement, right? Putin has taken over 20% of Ukraine, and we're talking to him, working out some kind of deal. That's a bit of a green flag, isn't it? Green light to Putin doing that. Having Orban there as the conduit between the EU and Russia. What do you think?
For the media market, in Russia, it's also a very good product right now. The war is not going anywhere. There was a Russian offensive in Kharkiv region.
Right.
It wasn't a success, if we are thinking about taking Kharkiv or territory there. So right now, Putin has to play for time, and events like this, it's kind of crafty for him,
Yeah. Well, we shall see what, if anything, happens in the remaining 6 months of
one thing. I think that some of the EU politicians just waiting for the Polish presidency which starting
which is
25
January.
Yes, just waiting this 6 months. Okay, Orban will do something, and because most of this decision we see this is the first week of this Hungarian presidency.
Yeah.
In the middle of July, in the Strasbourg, during the inauguration European Parliament session, we will hear, I guess, what Orban plans for this next month.
Well, and also this is holiday time, so no serious decisions are going to be made. So some are saying, well, actually, that's keeps him safe, keeps Orban safe. Let's move on now to Scholz's visit to Poland, and one of the main topics of discussion, of course, was reparations from Germany. For atrocities during the Second World War. Short video, let's have a look.
It was all smiles as PM Donald Tusk welcomed the German Chancellor to Warsaw. These were the first so-called intergovernmental consultations since 2018. Relations between the countries have warmed since Tusk's pro-European coalition came to power in December, ending 8 years of nationalist rule in Poland, during which the Law and Justice government regularly painted Germany as a hostile force. In a sign that bilateral ties are improving, Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Germany would try to implement support initiatives for survivors of the Nazi German occupation of Poland during World War II. The two leaders also spoke about the need for cooperation on a ground-based integrated air defence system dubbed the European Sky Shield Initiative. At a joint press conference, Tusk spoke about how Berlin wanted to help share responsibility for protecting the EU border, which is under pressure from Belarus as Minsk pushes migrants to the eastern frontier. And in a move aimed at boosting trade and defence cooperation, Scholz said transport routes must be expanded between the countries. Berlin had reportedly been looking to provide a strong base for good neighbourly relations. Tusk ended by saying he believes it will ultimately be Poland and Germany who, in the long run, will represent a sensible, moderate centre in Europe.
Now, some are saying, Joe, that there wasn't an agreement on reparations, and we just heard that Olaf Scholz said, "Well, we'll try and do something for the living survivors of that period." How do you think? What are the optics with regard to this meeting?
Well, I think was it 1.3 trillion.
Oh yes, the previous government.
Euros or dollars that
euros.
were demanded by the previous government. That was obviously, in terms of the optics, that was obviously unrealistic, right? But it was symbolically quite powerful,
right.
Big figure. Sikorski, I think, talked about this. Has talked about this since the new government came in at the end of last year, and he said something about a kind of symbolic gesture that the Germans could make in terms of financing memorial centres, museums. I'm not sure exactly what it was.
Yes, there's an educational component, and
probably a lot less than 1.3 trillion.
Well, I'm sure it's
euros. So, what the commentator just said here, I think, is important. I think it's about Germany, Poland and Germany showing unity, right? I mean, in particular now that we have the possibility of a Trump second term. Situation in Ukraine. The thing that we talked about in relation to Orban going to Ukraine. I mean, it may be that the Orban thing is about kind of throwing a leaf into the water and seeing how it ripples.
Right, understood.
I mean, and this is about a kind of symbolic way of saying that we are
we're together.
It's also for Poland a way of saying we are equal partners with Germany.
Right, yeah. What do you make of it, Wojciech? I mean, as we saw there were concessions by Olaf Scholz, a sense of responsibility, if you like, for the border and so on. Is this a true warming of the relationship?
I don't know, we haven't heard about any results of this meeting, like materialistic results that one can, think about, read about, and then assess in their own minds, Germany is not going to help us with our barrier on the eastern flank of NATO and EU. At the same time, Olaf Scholz is saying we are both victims of Lukashenko and Putin, but at the same time we've got reports from Polish border guards that German police officers are getting migrants from their eastern lands and taking them back to Poland because it's, less paperwork if you do it like that, in a gray zone.
That has only happened once, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but, the people and the right-wing politicians are making big stuff of it, and, we don't know how many incidents like that occurred, actually. If you look into administrations of Polish Western voivodeships and so on, people are saying, there are more and more migrants right now, and the local administration doesn't know what to do with them. Can't cope with them, actually, yeah. And, right now Scholz saying that, we are going to cooperate, whatever, it's just diplomatic talk. We haven't seen any results of that. And at the same time, Olaf Scholz is in much more difficult position than Emmanuel Macron is, because he's a chancellor of the coalition that has less support than the main opposition party, if you look up the results of the EU elections. So there is a lot of talk about new elections, snap elections in Germany. So, Politico even called him a lame duck, also Emmanuel Macron, two of them. So why didn't Donald Tusk somehow pushed him, under a car, saying that, we have to do something more. I'm not enthusiastic to what you are saying and so on. Yeah. He didn't do that, but he could, actually.
He could have. So basically, what Wojciech is saying is, look, Scholz needs some kind of profile-raising activity, and this was one of them, and
of course this meeting was much more symbolic than bring the real politic, tools to solve the problems. Of course this meeting was very important for the Polish opinion, I guess, more than German, because we see that some of the rising of the problems in the relationship between the German and Poland. We talk about the migrants transferring from Germany to Poland, from Poland to the Germany, about the German support of the eastern flank border. We know that in the last Brussels summit that the Donald Tusk and Olaf Scholz got, let's say, some kind of not conflict, but say something hard words, because Poland really need the EU money, the Western countries' money, for the building this big fences, bigger fence at the Polish-Belarusian and Polish-Russian border, and we see that the German, of course, spent much more than in the last year about the defense. Right. About the more than 2% of GDP for the defense, but for Polish perspective, it's still not too much. And of course, this is a Polish perspective about this historic stuff. Of course, we expect from the Scholz government much more about the not reparation, but maybe some kind of more real help to the survivors, building the new Polish-German history hall in Berlin. It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Exactly.
Okay. So in the last minute or so that we have left, just a couple of sentences each, if you would, please. Joe, I'll start with you. Scholz's future as leader in Germany, is it shaky?
Well, I think what our friend said is absolutely the case. Yes, I mean he's caught in a similar dilemma. Right? I mean it's when the left moves to the centre ground that it gets dragged into problems which are not of their making. Right? I mean he's
right, and he's in a coalition, which of course adds to the uncertainty. Wojciech, I guess I know what you're going to say, but
Yeah, there might be snap election in Germany, and that would be a big battle over European future.
Well, it would, wouldn't it? I mean, the two largest economies in the European Union suddenly have this big, earthquake.
We will know more after the September local election in the Thuringia, in the Saxony, and we will see how far-right Alternative für Deutschland will take the power or not, and it will be maybe the first point to the possible snap election in Germany, which will be earthquake in the political scene, of course.
It certainly would. It certainly would. So, yes, much to watch coming up, and much to keep our fingers crossed over, I think, all round. But thank you, gentlemen, all very much for coming along and sharing your insights and analysis of the news.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thank you. And that's all from us on this edition of Press Corner. But don't go away. As always, we have lots more coming up. Have a great Sunday. Goodbye.